Morning. We have general questions. Question number 1, John Finney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it does to support shared or common housing registers for local authorities, housing associations and housing cooperatives.
Minister Margaret Burgess.
The Scottish Government has published a number of documents that provide advice on how to establish a common housing register. These are all available on the Government's website, and I can provide the member with the details to the relevant parts of the website.
John Finney.
I thank the Minister for that response. Minister, I have raised a number of issues about dwelling houses owned or under the control of the Scottish Government. I wonder if you would undertake to, and it's been suggested there isn't necessarily a central data base for all these properties, would you undertake to look at the opportunity for these to be made available to local authorities, housing associations, housing cooperatives, rather than having them disposed of on the open market, or worse still, to property speculators?
Minister.
I'm willing to discuss suggestions the member has on that. So what I'll do is arrange to meet with the member and officials and get the details of what is being proposed, and then we can look at that and get back to him.
James Kelly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given that housing completions are at the lowest since 1947 and waiting lists are at 155,000, does the Minister recognise there's a real issue with getting affordable housing in many of our communities, and will she agree to work with Labour on a national housing action plan to address these issues?
Minister.
The Scottish Government has a vision for housing and a plan to ensure that there increase the supply of affordable housing and in rented housing market. We're already doing that, and certainly if the member has any suggestions he wants to bring forward to us, we'll certainly look at that, and we've offered meetings in terms of the housing bill that we're putting through just now, and we're willing to discuss housing issues that they wish to raise with us, but we certainly are doing all we can to increase the affordable housing supply in Scotland.
Question number 2, Mark MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it plans to amend the statutory consultation period for school closure decisions by local authorities.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Ross.
Presiding Officer, we have no such plans at this time. The changes to the Schools Consultation Scotland Act 2010, which are being taken forward as part of the Children and Young People Bill, implement a number of recommendations of the Commission on the delivery of rural education. The Commission considered the consultation process of school closure proposals as part of its remit and did not recommend a change to the statutory consultation period for local authorities.
Mark MacDonald.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. The Cabinet Secretary may be aware that later today Aberdeen City Council will finally abandon the proposals to close Bramble-Brae and Middleton Park schools. The decision to consult on these proposals was taken on the 7th of February 2013, meaning the entire process has lasted just a week short of a full calendar year. It took 6 months from that decision to consult to the consultation actually beginning. Can the Cabinet Secretary look at the issue of timescales between decisions to consult and the commencement of consultations, because where there is a protracted delay, it leads to great uncertainty and anxiety for pupils, parents and communities?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. I do remember visiting at least the exterior of Bramble-Brae Primary School when the member was the by-election candidate, and it's a very good school, and I'm glad the decision was made about it. I also remember the Labour candidate in the by-election claiming that the delays were due to a failure of Education Scotland, where that turned out not to be the case. But there is a very strong argument to be had about making sure that this process is timeous and respects parents. And I have concerns that councils who operate what one might call a pre-consultation consultation are perhaps sometimes not doing that to gain information or to get views, but in order to soften up or wear down opposition to closure. So I do hope that councils will be mindful that this is a difficult and stressful time for any community, for any group of parents, and that therefore the legislation is designed to help and protect both sides and to create a level playing field for both sides. And that's why when the amendments come to this chamber, Mr Kelly seems to have views on this which he wants to give from his seated position, Presiding Officer. But when the amendments come to this chamber, I hope Mr Kelly, voluble as he now is about the matter, will support the measures that are designed to assist parents and to assist local authorities.
Question number 3, Linda Fabiani.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the effectiveness of the 101 non-emergency police telephone number.
Cabinet Secretary Kenny McCaskill.
This is a matter for Police Scotland and the Scottish Police Authority. However, I understand that calls to the 101 non-emergency number are steadily increasing, which has helped make the police more accessible while reducing pressure on the treble 9 system. There are, on average, 280,000 non-emergency calls to the 101 number per month and around 46,000 emergency treble 9 calls per month. 101 non-emergency number replaces all local police station numbers with one easy-to-remember number, which can be used to contact police anywhere in the country. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It can also be used to arrange for a police officer to visit a member of the public in their own home at a time that suits them.
Linda Fabiani.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that very informative answer. I am aware that the 101 number costs 15 pence flat rate from wherever it's called and for however long the call lasts. And I recognise that Police Scotland don't in fact make any money from this. But I wonder if there could be consideration given further down the line, perhaps encouraged by the Cabinet Secretary, that the 101 call should in fact be free. And I think particularly of times when many people rely on mobile phones these days, and if they have no credit, would find it perhaps difficult to phone 101, and that could keep people phoning 999 when it's not always appropriate.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thanks. Well, I understand that the point the member makes, and I'll certainly feed that back both to the Chief Constable and to the Scottish Police Authority. But I think Police Scotland's advice is quite clear. If people are in any doubt, they should use the 999 number. That is obviously where a crime is in progress, somebody is suspected of acting in an area nearby, there's a danger to life or limb. People should not hesitate to use the 999 number, which, as Ms Fabiani is aware and said, is free. Obviously, the non-emergency 101 number is meant to allow people to contact their local police station or police officer to get advice, to make arrangements, and for matters that are not a non-emergency. As she correctly has pointed out, that is a flat rate of 15p from a landline or mobile network, no matter what time of day or how long the call is. In many instances, this will in fact be cheaper than previous non-emergency numbers, such as calling the local police station, for example. But I will happily feed that matter back to those who are charged with the responsibility.
Question 4, Fiona MacLeod.
To ask the Scottish Government what powers local authorities have to exempt care home residents from council tax payments on their unoccupied properties.
Minister Derek Mackay.
Statutory responsibility for the implementation and administration of council tax, including eligibility for discounts or exemptions, lies with the relevant local authority. Ministers have no powers to intervene in individual cases. An unoccupied dwelling can be exempt where the liable person was formerly resident, has moved to receive personal care, whether in hospital or a home or elsewhere. However, local authorities must take all circumstances into account when assessing any individual's council tax liability, and there may be some cases in which this exemption does not apply.
Fiona MacLeod.
I thank the Minister for that informative answer, but can I also ask the Minister, is he aware that Eastern Bartonshire Council are demanding council tax payments of up to 90% from care home residents whose unoccupied properties are on the market for lease?
Sir.
Well, thanks to the member's information, I'm aware now of those circumstances. It is still the case, of course, referring back to my original answer, that ministers have no power to intervene. I would advise the member, nonetheless, that there is an appeals process that can be undertaken, and any challenge to the decision of the local authority can be taken to the Valuation Appeals Committee, and I would refer the member to that source.
Question number 5, Cameron Buchanan.
To ask the Scottish Government when it last met Historic Scotland and what issues were discussed.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
I last met Historic Scotland officials on Monday the 20th of January on the very top of the Forth Rail Bridge as we marked the submission that week of the dossier supporting the nomination of the iconic Forth Bridge as a World Heritage Site. The Forth Bridge is renowned throughout the world, and I'm sure that members across the Chamber will want to express support for the nomination.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply. Given the concerns about the recent planning application at Culloden and yesterday's call-in decision over the new Lanark, both of which are hugely important historical sites, Does she retain the full confidence in the organisation and the statutory framework with which it operates?
Cabinet
Furthermore, has she sought assurances from Historic Scotland that its procedures for investigating the potential impact of planning decisions are suitably robust, since it is critical that we demonstrate safeguards are in place if we are to secure World Heritage Site status for the Forth Bridge?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I do have confidence in their procedures. They're very robust indeed. Every individual application is different. Some are to do with different types of sites. In relation to Culloden, I can reassure you that for the first time ever, we have an inventory of battle sites. We are also consulting on legislation draft proposals on planning. In relation to that, we will be making sure that the draft proposal that has been considered by the Planning Minister makes sure that planning authorities should protect, conserve and, where appropriate, seek to enhance the key characteristics and special qualities of sites on the current inventory of historic battlefields. In relation to the Hindford situation, that's had a call-in for ministers, and I'm sure he'll understand on that basis I can't discuss this at this time in this chamber.
Question number 6, Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. Can I ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to increase the quality and affordability of private rented housing?
Minister Margaret Burgess.
Private landlords are required to ensure that homes they let meet the statutory repairing standard throughout a tenancy. Tenants can apply to the private rented housing panel to force landlords to carry out repairs to meet the standard. The current housing bill includes measures to improve the quality of private rented housing, and rents in the private sector are set at the market rate.
Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. The current housing bill does include some welcome measures, such as the regulation of letting agents, which may help to drive out some of the most exploitative practices in that industry. But is the Minister aware of the many tenants who are being landed with unfair and, in some cases, illegal fees and charges, or with deposits rebranded as advance rent in order to get around the deposit protection scheme? Is the Minister open to amendments to the housing bill to address some of these areas, as well as another issue such as energy efficiency in the private rented sector, where uptake is not high and it's increasing the unaffordability of costs that people are facing in that sector?
Minister.
Okay. In terms of the energy efficiency in the sector, the member will be aware that we are consulting in that next year about energy measures within the private rented sector, and we're taking that on board. We are aware of some of the issues that the member has raised about the tenancy deposits and about the fees and premiums, which we've already clarified. But during the course of the housing bill, we are listening very carefully to stakeholders and members at ways. If there's ways that we can improve the situation for tenants, then I'm open to listening to that.
Mary Fee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There has been a huge growth in buy-to-let with one property owners. What assurances can the Minister give that the proposed regulations in the housing bill will ensure that single property landlords are regulated properly to protect individual tenants from unfair charges and poor standards?
Minister.
All landlords are registered under the Landlord Registration Scheme, and the housing bill will hope to ensure that there's tougher measures to enforce that. We already have enforcement action, and we want to make sure that that is used and is strengthened. Also, in terms of the letting of the registration of letting agents, there will be regulations. We'll have a code of conduct. It will be consulted on throughout the sector, including landlords, letting agents and tenants, to produce a code of conduct that will be meaningful, and that where we can target landlords that are not meeting the standards that we intend them to meet. So we're doing what we can. As I said, we've offered a meeting with members of opposition parties to discuss the issues that they have concerns about as the bill is moving through, and I would hope to continue that discussion with the member then.
Question number 7 in the name of Claire Adamson has not been lodged. The member has provided an explanation. Question number 8, Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what role oil and gas revenues will play in any post-referendum negotiations with the UK Government.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, with access to all the policy levers that independence will bring, Scotland will at last be able to create the fiscal incentives which will not only allow the industry to realise its potential, and avoid the damaging taxation decisions previously made by successive UK governments, but which will also allow all of Scotland's people to benefit. For decades, our oil wealth has been squandered, and unlike Norway and virtually every other oil-producing country, no oil fund was set up. This was a huge error, as politicians, including Alistair Darling, David Steele and Neil Kinnock, have indicated. As Dennis Healey has said, the UK has underplayed the value of Scotland's oil.
Maureen Watt.
I thank the Minister for that very full answer. I take it then that he agrees with the former Scottish Office economist, the Cuthberts, who say that Scotland deserves billions of pounds in compensation for the way oil revenue has been squandered since the 1970s. And what steps does he think he can take to recompense the Scots for that?
Minister.
Well, the answer lies in our hands on the 18th of September, Presiding Officer. Since oil and gas production began in Scotland, the UK Government has raised approximately £180,000 million in direct tax revenue from oil and gas production. Adjusted for inflation, this is equivalent to approximately £300,000 million at today's prices. These revenues have gone directly into the UK exchequer, with successive governments failing to invest the windfall for the long term. To date, around 90% of total oil and gas tax revenue has been generated in Scotland's waters. Independence for Scotland will ensure that Scotland's vast oil and gas reserves are efficiently and safely extracted for the benefit of the Scottish people. With more than half of oil and gas reserves by value still to be extracted, there is ample opportunity to invest Scotland's oil wealth for future generations.
Alex Johnson.
Will the Minister's consideration take into account the potential impact on future tax revenue of decommissioning costs?
Minister.
Yes, it will, and it will also be based on a policy which has been sadly absent in the UK, namely stability and predictability. As with 3 unheralded hikes in the last decade or more, as Sir Ian Wood said, fiscal instability has been a significant factor in basin underperformance. We rely on what Sir Ian Wood says, not what the Conservatives say.
Question number 9, Mark Griffin.
To ask the Scottish Government what consultation it has had with trade unions since the publication of the ScotRail franchise draft invitation to tender.
Minister Keith Brown.
Building on the extensive engagement prior to the publication of the draft invitation to tender on the 19th of November 2013, officials from Transport Scotland have been in discussions with the trade unions on the 10th of January this year, concluding discussions with ASLEF regarding apprenticeships, and on the 20th and 21st of January with the STUC, clarifying issues around staff uniforms.
Mark Griffin.
Thank you. Can the Minister tell me why the Scottish Government felt it was appropriate to ban the wearing of trade union badges and ties in the new ScotRail franchise, given the long tradition of that in our railways, and ask why officials were upholding that ban on trade union insignia up until a last-minute U-turn?
Minister.
I think the member is perhaps misinformed. The issue was around the branding of the new franchise holder to ensure the ScotRail brand was maintained and made clear to future passengers. As soon as the issue was raised, of course, with the STUC talking to officials, we clarified that point. So we do support, first of all, trade union membership within the rail unions. I've met with the trade unions involved in the rail industry more than any previous Transport Minister. We've had very effective engagement on the ITT. I think they would tell you that it's probably the best deal they've got in terms of a franchise across the UK and compared to previous administrations, and this one fairly minor issue was dealt with very quickly to the satisfaction of the STUC. That's proper and constructive engagement.
Question number 10, Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of childcare provision in an independent Scotland.
This will have to be brief, Minister.
In Scotland's future, we have set our ambitions to establish, after independence, a universal system of high-quality early learning and childcare for children from age 1 to when they start school. And we've also published 2 papers on the Scottish Government website setting out our assessment of childcare provision in an independent Scotland.
Briefly, Ms Ewing.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and just be very clear, can the Minister explain to women across Scotland why it is only a yes vote that can secure such transformational change in childcare provision?
Briefly, Minister.
Independence means we have access to tax and revenues generated by increased female participation in workplace to fund childcare. Independence also means we don't need to invest in immoral weapons of mass destruction, and it means we don't rely on the further expansion through handbacks of our own money back through consequentials. So it's only with independence that we have the chance to create the fairer and more equitable country that we seek.
We now move to First Minister's